Welcome back to the High School Bekius program. Today we're doing Tenement Aleph and Moed Katan. There's four main topics of today's daf. Some of the topics are about fixing clothing, that if you're going to sew the clothing, it has to be done not normally if it's done by a professional. Then we're going to talk about fixing up beds, that if there are ropes on the bed frame, big machlokas exactly how they could be fixed. If it could be, the strings could be woven, interlaced, or only partially, or just could be tightened up. Then we're going to talk about fixing up a mill, if you can create it totally normally because it's for food, or you can only do a small amount of fixing. And then we're talk about cutting the nails of donkeys who push the mill for grinding up grain. The Gemara says that your regular person, non-professional, who sews clothing on Chol Moed, can do it normally. What's considered a non-professional? Any person that is not able to sew one length of a string in one time, that's because they're not professional. What they used to do is take the string with the needle and go back and forth through the clothing to sew things together. And after you've done a few stitches, you would, as long as the string would go, you'd go back and forth with the needle, and then you would pull it tight to make all those stitches with the needle that you did. If you do that, that means you're professional. If you can't do the entire string length going back and forth with stitches and then pull tight afterwards, you have to do one stitch at a time and pull tight to keep it straight and keep it for not falling apart. That means you're not professional. It means any person who can't make a hem with a little bit thicker clothing on the bottom of a pants or whatever that would make it straight, that would be professional. If you can't make it straight, you can make it a little bit thicker or thinner or lower or higher in one spot. That obviously means you're not a professional. What does a professional do? He has to be machlib. My machlib. It means he scatters the stitches, some here and some there. Like the teeth of a dog, that they're lower and higher. And so too the stitches in the clothing are going to be not a straight line. The machlokas of the Mishnah was whether you're allowed to take strings and weave them. We'll talk about what that means. That's misargin. That's the first thing. And then mimatchin is the next opinion, and you can only do mimatchin. That's going to be fixing up the strings a little bit. What are these two definitions that we're talking about? Fixing up the bed, the strings, the ropes on the bed frame. My misargin, my mimatchin. Keep. Dimi told us there are two Amoraim that argued about this. And they both quoted Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan that they argued about earlier about the following. One says it means crisscross, meaning in both directions, putting the ropes on the bed frame horizontally, lateral this way, you cover the entire bed frame. That's what it means, Misargin, means normal weaving. And the other opinion says only Mematchin means Shesha below Arab. You only do partially weaving, only going one direction and not the other direction. Chadamar, no, Misargin Shesi below Arab. And the other opinion is no, that's not the machlok. It's nothing to do with weaving or partially weaving. It's less than that. It's a step down from that. One opinion says Misargin, which means Shesha below Arab, partial weaving, only one direction. It means if those ropes became loose, you can tighten them. Is that actually true? These two versions of what the machlok is really about. It says you're definitely not allowed to put ropes on initially to a bed frame. I understand according to the opinion that says that one opinion allowed doing weaving completely. You're allowed to do partial weaving. Well, then I understand why Rav Tachlifa had to bother to tell us that you're not allowed to put on strings, because there is an opinion who says you're allowed to weave it normally. So if you're allowed to weave it normally both directions, so maybe you even put on strings. No, you can't do that. You're only allowed to partially weave, according to the opinion that you can only partially weave, even according to the most lenient opinion. The other opinion says you can only tighten. So according to that version, the opinion, the whole machlokas was whether you're allowed to partially weave or tighten. So if you're not allowed to weave normally when the strings are already on, are you allowed to put on the strings? Of course you're not. Why would Rav Tachlifa need to say that? Obviously, Rav Tachlifa must have started with a version that the machlokas was whether you're allowed to weave it normally or just partially. Kasha. Yes, in fact, that is a difficulty for that version of the machlokas. Is there actually an opinion that Misargin means only partially weaving? That's not right. Rameir says in order for a bed frame to have Kabbal's Tuma, it means to be usable, that they wove 3 boxes. of areas where you had the ropes going over each other. So obviously, Masargin is defined as a box, perpendicular weaving normally. So Rabin said, no, that's actually not the correct versions of what's going on in the machlokes. Rather, what is going on? Everybody agrees Masargin means weaving normally. So the first opinion of the Mishnah says you're allowed to weave normally. Kuli amalo pligi sheshav means going crisscross. What does the other opinion of Matchan mean? One opinion says that is partial weaving. Means tightening. One opinion says you are allowed to be misarig, and certainly then you could even do the lesser fixing like matchan. Rabbi Yosef you can only do the lesser amount, not the greater thing. Rabbi Yesh Omrim, the third opinion that we find over here, you can't even do that. Can't even do matchan. I understand the opinion who says matchan means partial weaving. Well, and I understand the opinion. We understand the opinion who says you're not allowed to do that. I can't possibly understand why would anybody say you're not allowed to tighten the strings. According to the opinion of matchan means tightening the strings. How can there be opinion in the matchan low? They're not allowed to do that. What malacha is that? Just tighten strings. You're not creating it, you're not boning, you're not fixing anything, you're just tightening. In fact, that is some tircha you're not supposed to do that. Since you can fill it up with kalim, utensils that would fit the bed frame and put then some fit the kalim on top to make it usable, and then put some pillows and blankets on top of the bed frame, it would be usable in some regular ad hoc fashion. So then you should do that and not have to do the tircha of fixing the ropes at all. The first opinion is you're allowed to even create initially, establish a oven or a kiraim that is a kitaner is for 2 pots, a kiraim is for 1 pot. These are stovetops areas that they used to cook in, and rechaim is a mill. You're allowed to do that on Chol HaMoed. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer you're not allowed to initially create a mill on Chol Moed. You're not allowed to establish it, fix it, create it. But we'll see what he's going to allow. My mechabshin, Rabbi Yehuda Omer menakar richaya. What is mechabshin? You're not allowed to initially be mechabshin. That you're not allowed to, certainly not allowed to create it. But you're not allowed to be mechabesh. It means to make holes in the grinding part of the mill, and to clean out if there's anything obstructing those holes that would be able to grind the grain. Rechiel Amar Batina. It means the hole in the middle of the mill, which allowed the grain to fall in after it was crushed up. The flour then would fall in the middle. So they have that funnel, to have that area where it would collect. You could make that. That was the mechabshin that Rabbi Yehuda said was forbidden. The first opinion says you're allowed to set up a oven or a stove that's 1 pot, either way, but you can't finish it. Chalmim say no, af yigmor. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo Maminu Chadash Mechabshin Yishana. Rabbi Yehuda says for the ovens and stoves, you're allowed to set them up, and you're allowed to be mechabesh the yishana, you're allowed to fix up the old ones. You're not allowed to do it at all, even mechabshin, you're not allowed to. Even the old ones. So in this version, this bride, so you see, mechabshin is doing some sort of fixing, let's say for the mill, is allowed for old stuff, but not for the new stuff in Rabbi Yehuda. And then we have an opinion that's more strict and doesn't allow even mechabshin kol ikr, doesn't allow mechabshin at all, even on old stuff. I understand in terms of the mills, what are we talking about mechabshin? And the one who says making holes, well, we understand why you could say mechabshin, making holes could be a machloket. That we could talk about that, we could discuss it by an old mill that you could have, that the area got obstructed and it got flattened or whatever, and therefore you need to make new holes in the grinding part of the mill. If we're talking about making the hole in the middle of the mill, therefore the flour should be able to fall in the middle. Well, of course that was there from the beginning. Why would they have to make that hole in the middle for an old one? Why are you doing that? Obviously it was there. If you go into okay, if you want to expand it, you want to make it a little bigger, that's exactly the machlok is about mechabshin. Once Rav Huna heard someone that was making these holes in the grinder part of the mill on Chol Moed. Amar man hi, who is this man? The achal gufe is desecrating his body. The kamachal Chol Moed is cursing him that he was being mechal Chol Moed, desecrating Chol Moed, so he should be mechulal, he should be desecrated. He held like the opinion that was forbidden to fix to keep mechabshin even the old, do even a small fixing of the grinding part of the mill, even of an old one. Rav Chama no Rav Chama allowed to be no care, just to fix up those holes, to make those little holes in the grinding part. Even if you have work animals, the riding animal, a horse or a donkey that you ride, you're allowed to you're allowed to cut their nails, so this way that they should be able to work better and ride better. You're allowed to do that so they're not in pain. You're not allowed to grind in the donkeys that are working the mill, push the wheel. You're not allowed to cut their nails, even though they're going to be a little bit of pain and they won't be able to do so much grinding. That's okay. They're doing a little bit of grinding. Rebuta, Shari, the Mishkal Tufrei, L'chamra, the Rebuta allowed doing that because they'll work better. And to establish a mill, to build it, the bottom part, to set up the wooden pole that was used to move the main heavy wheels of the mill. Uria is to build pens and barns for the animals to live in.